Right, breaking news on our watch. We have eyes on the Charlotte Maxeke Hospital, the fire there. Let me bring in Mbalenhle Mthethwa. She's been covering this story. Mbalenhle, thank you very much indeed for coming through. Give us the latest. What are you seeing from your vantage point?
Good morning, Blaine. Yes, indeed. We are at Charlotte Maxeke Hospital, where a fire broke out at one of the parking lots in the morning yesterday at around 11. And we understand that it started in a dispensary or a storeroom where all the medication is kept. And that's where it started and started spreading to other floors. We understand that this particular dispensary is situated right next to a parking lot. And we heard from some of the people who work here. I'm not sure what their designations are at the hospital. However, they did explain to us that it started on P2 before it started spreading all the way up from P2 to all the way up to P4. And essentially, I'm just going to move out of the shot to show you what's happened. We understand from what has been said here during this media briefing that the fire has been contained to the source, the original source. However, it has not been completely extinguished. We understand that patients were moved and evacuated from the hospital, and this was all in an effort to protect patients from smoke inhalation and so on. We understand that services at this particular hospital have been suspended and will stay suspended temporarily so for a period of 7 days, and this is just to ensure that, when patients do return, they return to a safer hospital. We understand that, it is very unfortunate that the hospital is going to be closed at a time when the country is actually fighting a pandemic, a global pandemic, and obviously hospitals and facilities such as this one are quite crucial in that fight. However, at this stage, I think the department, the Gauteng Premier, as well as the hospital are just trying to ensure that the hospital is safe before patients can then return. We understand that an amount of 415 patients has already been evacuated, and evacuations efforts had started from as early as yesterday. Initially, patients were being moved from one ward to another. They were moved to safety within the hospital. But when the blaze got out of hand, we understand that patients were then moved to various hospitals around the province. One of the concerns that comes to mind when you hear about patients being moved from such a big hospital to other hospitals around the province, you wonder about overcrowding. But what I understand is that because the country was already standing by and prepared for COVID-19 and an influx of patients, the patients who have been moved here will be accommodated, and issues of overcrowding should not be an issue given all of those preparations with regards to COVID-19. Essentially, we've also heard that one of the floors from the third floor has caved in. It is particularly hot, and one of the reasons the blaze was as harsh and as intense as it was and still is potentially is because of the substances that were burning. We understand that this is where the dispensary is situated, and therefore the medication, a lot of plastic containers and so on, and that is what has been fueling the fire at this stage. We understand that there is an outstanding of 200 patients who are still waiting to be evacuated. However, we have gotten confirmation from the Premier of Gauteng that these patients would have been relocated in other hospitals around the province by the end of the day today. When we got here, we saw there was a lot of smoke in the air. You knew that the building had caught fire, and you could really see the extent of the damage and of the fire from just walking around here, because the smoke was all over the place. And now essentially we've heard that the premier is saying that they just want to put safety before anything else.
So what we've learned so far is that they have established the origins of the fire. It was that storeroom housing the medical supplies. What's the next step, Mbali? Because this is now an active fire scene because the fire has not been completely extinguished. When will the engineers be allowed to go into that hospital and assess the damage?
Okay, so from what I understand from speaking to people around here, people have already been inside, and the Premier did go inside just to assess the situation. When we got here, his convoy was actually on the other side of the hospital, and we followed them back here to where the media was camping out. And some of the spokespeople or some of the communications people who travel with the minister who had safety boots on and were showing me that their boots have actually been burnt from just walking on the floor. So that basically tells you how hot it is inside there, and that was part of the reason one of the floors actually caved in. It was because of the extent of that heat. We are still going to find out when exactly the fire is expected to be extinguished. However, the minister and all the hospital officials as well as the MEC for Health are quite happy with the fact that it's been contained to its source, and that, you know, efforts to extinguish that fire continue and seem to be quite successful. We understand that after the fire started at 11 a.m. yesterday, it was somewhat extinguished, and then again it was reignited late at night, and that is when we started seeing the hospital relocating many of their patients. We understand that a majority of those patients were relocated first were those who are in ICU, who need machines around them, who are in a very bad state in terms of health, and those patients were the number one priority.
During the press conference, Mbalenhle, they were talking about the water source that they were using in order to extinguish this blaze. Was that an issue with regards to the water source that they are currently using?
So what this is, it essentially could mean that going forward there could be a strengthening of safety protocols, health and safety protocols. We understand that the water supply is not situated inside the hospital, but it is not situated too far away that it would be difficult to reach that water supply in the event of the fire. And we heard someone basically just explaining that the cause of the fire, or maybe the time it's taken to essentially douse that fire or extinguish that fire, it is not really dependent. It is not because there was no water. There is sufficient water to extinguish the fire, and they are looking into possibly bringing in those water sources to inside the hospital. You'll have to understand that the hospital was built a while ago, and right now they are just trying to put in all of those upgrades to ensure that, you know, everything is close and that there are water sources close to the hospital. Which does not mean that the water supply is too far away that it cannot be reached in the event of a fire. It is still close enough, and it was close enough to extinguish the fire when the fire started.
With regards to the cause, I understand investigations are continuing, but the Premier did mention something very interesting that piqued my interest. He said that at this stage there is no foul play suspected. Give us some context with regards to the comment.
Okay. Yes, essentially, you know, he was essentially just explaining to the media delegation that was here that, you know, they do not suspect any foul play, that the fire was not started by someone specifically, but it was an unfortunate accident. And I think that's what he was trying to explain when he said their investigations show that there has not been any form or any sign of foul play. So essentially, he was also being asked questions about the fact that, you know, this is not the first time that, you know, the hospital has experienced a fire of this nature. One of the journalists here did ask about another incident a bit much earlier on this year, and essentially, this was basically to ask questions around, plans to, see if it is at all possible to prevent incidents of this nature from occurring in the near future, and also just finding out what exactly is the source. And we know that in every incident of this nature, there are always investigations to determine when and how a fire started. We understand from one of the people who works here, she essentially explained that the fire started shortly after a delivery was made, but this does not necessarily mean that, there was any foul play. We are going to, wait and try and get more information from people of authority here, just to get a better sense of what's happened and how the fire started and what exactly started the fire.
It is no doubt a developing story. Mbali, when you get more information, any further developments, come back to me. We'll get you straight on air, give the viewers the very latest from where you are, the Charlotte Maxeke Hospital. Mbalenhle Mthethwa, live for us there. Thank you very much indeed. Police in